All right, we're going to get started. Welcome everyone to the Travel to the Clark Art Institute webinar. I'm Katie Mullen, Director of Exhibitions and Programs at the Center for Architecture. This event is part of our October virtual Travel to series in partnership with Bloomberg Connects. The Travel to series seeks to highlight Bloomberg Connects partners that feature iconic architecture and historically significant sites across the United States and around the world. Curators, preservationists, historians, and more bring these places and spaces to life for you to enjoy from the comfort of your home or office. Stay tuned for more exciting Travel to programs to be announced later this year. A quick word about the free Bloomberg Connects app, which you can download on your mobile device if you haven't done so already. The app features our October guide, which is for anyone interested in connecting with architecture and design in New York. Whether you are an architectural historian, a design enthusiast, a student, or someone having their first architecture experience, the October Guide is designed to help you explore notable contemporary and historic sites across New York City's 5 boroughs. Find it on the Bloomberg Connects app. Today, we're so excited to be virtually traveling to the Clark Art Institute in Williamstown, Massachusetts. We're joined today by Olivier Meslay, Hardymon Director of the Clark Art Institute and one of Reed Hilderbrand's principals, Beka Sturges, for a discussion covering the landscape architecture that defines the campus, the intricacies of the project, and their collaboration with Tadao Ando, and the Clark's plans for deepening its commitment to environmental stewardship. A little bit about our speakers. In her design of landscapes for institutions and the public, Beka Sturges pursues the interplay between communities and their environments as a source of history, identity, and resilience. Since opening the Reed Hilderbrand office in New Haven in 2015, Sturges has steadily grown a staff and design culture with the capacity to sustain projects in the private and public sector, from the latest phase of Connecticut's Resilient Bridgeport Plan to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, to a major expansion to Storm King Art Center. Recent projects also include Powder Arts in Eden, Utah, and Great Island in Darien, Connecticut. Olivier Meslay is the Hardymon Director of the Clark Art Institute in Williamstown, Massachusetts. Prior to assuming the directorship at the Clark, he spent 8 years at the Dallas Museum of Art, where he held several leadership positions, most recently serving as Associate Director of Curatorial Affairs. Beka and Olivier will present, and then we'll have time for questions at the end of the event. Please feel free to submit questions throughout the program via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. And now I'm pleased to pass it off to Beka and Olivier.
Thank you, Katie. Well, welcome to this program. I think Beka will talk later and more in depth about the relationship with at the Clark between the landscape and the architecture and also our mission. But I will start to talk about a little bit the history of the Clark itself through the buildings. And you have here a view of the Clark from the hill. And you have also quickly a sense that we are not in an urban setting, to say the least. And we are really nested in the hill of the Berkshires mountains. We are far from almost everything. And there is a college in the same town, but we are a very, very special place also for that we are a surprise for visitors because we are mixing art, nature, education, research in a place which is unexpected in this sort of environment. Next. We were founded by these two people that you see here, Sterling Clark and Sterling and Francine Clark. They were collectors. She was French, he was American. They spent a lot of time in France, more than even in the US. And at the end of their life, they decided to give their collection, a large part of their fortune, to this institution to create this place in 140 acres. And it started next with a building, which is a very classical building built in white marble coming from Vermont. And inside of it, next, there is this collection, which is really a gem among American museums, which is interestingly mixing American art, Impressionist, academic art, and old masters. And this collection is really one of the major collections when it comes to European art in the country. Next. Then that was in 1955. The first building was opened in 1955. Then in 1973, this building, which was designed by Roberto Belluschi, the architect who designed, for example, the Pan Am building in New York, Roberto Belluschi made this building to accommodate a new program at the Clark, which was a graduate program on art history in link with Williams. And in the building, he also designed a very, very important space for a major library on art history to serve the student, but then after that, to serve later on a larger public. I mean, anybody could come to study in the library, but also scholars from all over the world who are fellows at the Clark. This is a program that happened a little bit later, but in this building, in this post-brutalist building, I would say, covered with granite, there is this program of a grad program, a research and academic program, and a library, plus the offices of the staff. Next. There is also collections that are in this same building. This is a collection of British art that has been given by Sir Edwin Menton. Next. But as you see here, there is still fully in operation this very important library, which is used by a lot of people since now 1973. It's a major library also because it is a library where you have open access to shelves, which is more and more unusual in the research world. Usually you have to request books after books or 3 books a day. Here you have full access to the open shelves. Next. Then the other component, and you have here two images on the same slide. I mentioned the 140 acres at the beginning of the presentation. This is part of the trail system that is in the on the hill mainly, which is a mix of meadows, but also a deep forest aspect of the estate. And you have here a very good map of the Clark as it is now. At the bottom, you have the combination of the 3 buildings, and we talk a little bit more about the last building that were built around that are at the bottom. In the middle, you have a conservation center. I will mention that later. And then you see all the trails that are available for a public. And the Clark has also this specificity to be open. All the grounds are open 24/7. And I think Beka will talk about that later, which is a very important aspect for the community, for the student, for everybody who is coming, the sort of this important feeling to really own not only the trails, but also the architectures during any time of the day. Next. And you see, again, another part of the trail system. Next. And here is the building that has been added with the Ando design. It is on the top of the hill. There is an art conservation center, which has been built in 2008. It's a conservation studio, but it's also on the right an exhibition space, which is really nested in the trees. And when you are inside, you have the feeling to be really inside the woods. Next. And you have here a design of the London Center as it is now. That is what is in white are the galleries, and what is the darker is only the beginning of the Art Conservation Center. Next. And you see here the Conservation Center, the Art Conservation Center, and you see also from not mid hill, you see a view of one of the walls that are part of the Art Conservation Center designed by Ando. Next. Another view. Next. And then you are here in the last edition, 2014, opened in 2014, built during 2-3 years. And this is what we call the Clark Center, which has been designed by Ando also, which is where there is the exhibition space, loading dock, sort of very, very practical aspect of the museum, but also a very public aspect of the museum with a typical entrance by Ando, sort of you go through a sort of journey or to arrive in the building itself. Next. And when you go through the building, you are suddenly in front of the reflecting pools. Beka, we talk about that later. That are in fact have changed a lot the identity of the Clark. The Clark was at the beginning, as you saw, a building facing the street. One was the library, a grad program, offices, and the other building was really about the collection itself. And suddenly, with the Ando building, we are facing nature, and the public is entering through that. And its first impression is really to communicate with the environment and the natural environment, which is very essential to the definition of the place, but also the definition of the Berkshires. Next. And you see here a series of photographs about the people that are enjoying the place. Again, night and days. You can come at 2 a.m. and you could access this place. Next. 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 And nested in this environment, there is also some natural element. This is the Scow Pond, which is a pond where during decades, people in Williamstown were coming to play hockey. And it's now we just cleaned a little bit the pond to restore the pond in its original depth and size. And we are working on that at this very moment. Next. You see a view of something that Beka will talk more about, which is the reflecting pool that are descending from the Ando building to a lower place where a lot of people are coming also to visit, but also we have programs here. Next. And I will end my presentation with this view of this probably student looking toward the valley, and with the different buildings of the Clark, with the Beluski building on the right, the original building from 1955, and then the Ando building on the left, and in the middle, nested in the middle, these reflecting pools. Now, I think I will take a moment of silence and we'll let Beka talk.
Thank you, Olivier. And good afternoon to everyone. So this is like a wonderful image for us to share. And I think one of the things that we at Reed Hilderbrand love most about this portrait of our work with the Clark is that I think in some ways for us the success of the project is that it causes you to understand and to think about and experience the large and also sort of small landscape of the Berkshires. People who love big mountains and know big mountains are, sort of tease the Berkshires for being hills. But there is a kind of incredible sensitivity to scale that has, I think, been recognized with the work at the Clark. And there are all these moments where you switch between understanding that you're in this large valley and surrounded by mountains, and then moments where you really engage up close with works of art. I think when we were first invited by the Clark to come and think about the project and to work with Ando, It was important to us to try and understand the history of sort of land development and culture around this place. And it was for, a moment in the colonial history of America, kind of the edge of the frontier, and it was cleared and settled. And, Williams College actually was a pretty early part of the culture of the place. And this kind of sense of being nested, I mean, you use that word a bunch, Olivia, but like the sense that you're actually in a protected and isolated corner of the nation, I think has persisted. There's a sense sometimes of being quite far away when you're in Williamstown and at the Clark. And we were interested in how the Clark could feel both a kind of major center for knowledge, research, training around the role of art in society, but also be a really specific place. This view out, this is one of the restored Selldorf galleries in the museum building, looking out at Scow Pond, and then the cover of the catalog using the tagline "Art in Nature," which was a phrase that Tadao Ando came up with to describe the project. But we like to pair them together because I think this view outside of the galleries in the museum was one of the most loved experiences that people had of the Clark when we began work there. It was one of the moments where you could be looking at sort of pastoral paintings and you could look out at this sweet sort of farm pond and feel that you were in a landscape that resonated with some of the works in the collection. And I think as we advanced our thinking about the potential of the project, there was a very large gift of Innis paintings that was made for the, I think it's part of the Manton collection. I don't know, Olivier, if there's more that should be noted, but we were really interested in some of the atmospheric qualities about the landscape that could feel kind of intimate and engaging. And so we sought to both get those distant views, those views from outside of architectural spaces, but also to produce some qualities like you see represented in this painting in our work at the Clark. When we started, there were some really challenging conditions in terms of creating a positive landscape condition. So this is a site plan looking at how the Clark campus was when we began our work. At the bottom of the page is South Street, which is a major north-south connector in Williamstown. Leads you, if you follow it north off the corner of the page, leads you into the center of town and campus. And I think something that you can start to see when you look at this plan is that the museum building, the white marble building that Olivier introduced, which I can put my cursor on, and the Manton building right next to it, they made a kind of bridge condition and really were fronted on the street in a very classic sort of New England kind of institutional posture. And the idea was that you would come, you would sort of apprehend these buildings, and then you would go to the back, park your car, nestled there in the square, this building was the conservation center. And then I think our understanding is that the construction of these parking lots created this finger of wetland that then ties into the creek network that laces its way throughout Williamstown. And so there's effectively a big moat connecting you to, even though the Clark, this is called Stonehill Meadow, and many of the locals walk there all the time, it was kind of a secret that land existed, and the woods were completely disconnected from your experience at the Clark. This was a large overflow parking lot that was used, and then this is that Scow Pond that has been mentioned. This is just an aerial view looking at the same condition, and we wanted to show it because one of the funniest sort of, I don't know, backhanded compliments that we've often been given about the work here is like, well, what did you do? Did you do anything? Like, it just looks like it's always been there. But in fact, when we started what is now the reflecting pools was this parking lot. And so this is just a sort of before and after series. You can see the project for the Clark Center in construction on the lower left-hand side. Before Ando was hired and before we were hired, Cooper Robertson had done, I think, quite a thoughtful planning exercise for the Clark, trying to understand how they could expand and begin to engage with the larger landholding. So that's this drawing up here. The bottom is the sort of, illustrative plan that we developed while, during the project, looking at a way of reconceiving how the arrival sequence would work, how we could take parking and sort of put it a little bit more to the side, have even that experience of arrival really take you through a landscape. And then even to get the Lunder Center, which is the conservation building that Olivier was talking about, how we could take you uphill and weave through the wetlands and the woods to make an experience that was really engaged in the landscape. When we started the project, Ando had generated this sketch, which was about, in some ways, the idea of the gallery being sort of scissored into the landscape. And so you can start to see the hint of a sheet of water that would be a uniting force. And this idea that through using the figure of the seven, you could slip a very large building into this landscape, and some notion of how trees would work there and some elevations. The project for the Clark Center was a very ambitious project, and we get to work on a lot of big projects, but there was a kind of complexity and vision involved in all the different people who worked to put this project together. And so I'm not going to call everybody out, but we did want to acknowledge that there was a really deep set of collaborations over quite a number of years between Selldorf, Gensler, Ando's office, Reed Hilderbrand, and Gontlow's office, all sort of shepherded by the Clark, the rather activist regulatory boards in Williamstown, Michael Conforti's very strong leadership and vision, and a fairly elaborate engineering effort. And then just to pause for a moment on a kind of aerial view, looking out where you can see the pond in the foreground, the way that the parking was reconceived to be something that you emerge into. It feels welcoming and sort of soft in some ways for parking, but it also puts that back of house set of conditions. You can see the truck loading dock that's right here. This is the wall that Olivier was mentioning, which is a sort of signature kind of welcome gesture from Ando. And then this sort of fingers of parking lots that re-engage with the woods and the water, all of which sets you up to really experience the long views and Stonehill Meadow. This is a repeat of an image that we already shared with you, but it's really important because this pond was sort of the original landscape that people understood, and how we reintegrated it and made it sort of the first thing that you see after you pass through this hedgerow of trees when you arrive at the Clark was important. This is a more illustrative view of the overall site plan, oriented now with north up. Not to kind of confuse you. One of the things that happens here is you come down in the low, and then actually as you move to the bottom of the page and up, you ascend. And this is the full complete plan. One of the things that had to happen for this to succeed is that we had to do the Lunder Center first as an enabling project, because in order to replace the parking lot and the old conservation center with the new Clark Center and the reflecting pools, we had to make another home for them up the hill. And so to do that, there was a question of how, what does it mean to have a disconnected campus? And that was, I think there was a compactness and more of a village kind of logic that everybody loved as a Clark. And the idea that we would actually put a major part of the community up the hill and kind of far away was initially quite challenging. This is one of the boardwalks that takes you up to those trails through the woods. And we spent a lot of time sort of making the case that actually it could be a wonderful experience to have part of the campus be nestled into the woods. And so then this was the campus walk that takes you up. It's the Howard Trail. And the idea that you would sort of see the drive, you would see the stream, you would be walking along the woods, but not in the darkness of the woods. So it could feel a little bit campus-like, was something that we all got excited about. And then there was a question again about scale. And there are dramatic views up here, but I think it was very important for Ando, for Michael Conforti, for us, that the building didn't feel totally exposed on a promontory without any level of vegetation. And so this idea of these sort of thickets that would envelop you became part of our strategy. And it's a pioneer species, right, when you're working with aspen and birch. And they've kind of beautifully become a language of the expansion project for the Clark. Something else that was necessary for us to spend quite a bit of time understanding was how could we make the Lender Center feel like it wasn't in a sea of parking? And so there's sort of the basic limited amount of parking that's in the foreground here by the entry. And then these lawn terraces are for overflow parking. And there's been, I think, some successes and failures about that, but this was a very early project for Reed Hilderbrand, where we worked with engineered soils to make a porous condition for the moments in time when they needed a lot more parking than they need on a typical day. And the parking and the sort of experience of this loop does put the building in a kind of context of the hills beyond. Wanted to share also that there was a lot of work and homework to work with the Conservation Commission, but even just the larger community about trying to understand what the land was made up of. And there was geotechnical work, but there's also a very extensive tree survey that we needed to do and sort of tree restoration, forest restoration plan to put it all back together to get the permission to make this clearing. And then this is a aerial photo of the project shortly after opening, taken by Alex McLean. And one of the things we like about it is there's this long history of clearing, clear cutting even, and pastures in this part of Massachusetts. And we had sort of thought that we would just be making another clearing in the woods, not a large clearing, but that having meadows and pastures that are carved out of the woods is very much a part of the landscape in this area. And so you can see the terrace landform here, the way that the circulation works, and the 7 wall that was part of the strategy for both the Clark Center and the Lender Center in Ando's work. And then just because you are a design audience, we wanted to share the model showing the topographic conditions of how we arrived at the way that the drive, the parking, the terraces, the views, the siting orientation of the building all were nestled. This is right, the stream quarter that we were working with. This is a very old historic road. And so we had to sort of find our way between the existing trees and those two linear conditions to fit the building in. And then pausing, right? So that was just the enabling project. And it's very interesting, I think, in some of these longer projects, how everybody sustains their energy and how you're able to carry momentum and knowledge from one project to the next. That project is actually much smaller than the full Clark Center. So here we're coming down the meadow path by the stone bench, down Stonehill Meadow back to the Clark Center. And I'm going to shift to a little bit of explaining this project. It really did begin with sort of how do you get people safely to the experience, and this idea that we would have fingers of woods or sort of and meadow that would span between the parking bays, and that there would be a generous and simple loop that the school buses and that folks who needed assistance or had accessibility needs could realize to come and be dropped off. I think the question of sort of how do you not put parking in the foreground of an experience was one that we were asking all the time. And I like this photo because there are moments as you're walking by the parking lots at the Clark today where there's a sort of ha-ha effect. And even though parking is right in front of you between the way the grasses are working and the edge of the woods work, you don't see the cars. There was a lot of engineering that went into all of this. And one of the things that came forward as a almost necessity for the project to proceed, and this is because there is a kind of activist conservation community in Williamstown and this part of the Berkshires, was to make sure that we were, as much as possible, like enhancing the environment even while we were developing the site. And so thinking about how reforestation, how stormwater, how infiltration, what the watershed of the Scout Pond was and how we were making sure that we were continuing to support it. All of that was necessary to us being able to build this project. And so we very quickly arrived at a very integrated sort of set of strategies between how the civil and site work were working with the building systems. And I'm not going to take you through all the details of this project, but it is a project where the sort of deep logics of the engineering are deeply aligned with the larger sort of day-to-day performance that the Clark benefits from today. We did have, just like we had up the hill, these two sort of yellow blobs that are like flanking shoulders. Those are two meadow parking lots for overflow parking, and they do get used heavily in the summer months when there's peak audiences at the Clark. I think one of the sort of brilliant intuitions that Ando had, and he's used this strategy on a number of projects, is the idea that the Clark suffered from a little bit of too much fragmentation and not enough focus on the larger environment. And so he had this idea of water as something that could unite the campus. And the reflecting was originally, I think, just a pool, and it became pools, but that this reflecting pool could be the thing that could be the bridge that tied together the Manton building, the museum building, and the new Clark Center. And there were a lot of studies looking at how what the scale of that could be. These are the white models or the original Ando models, and you can see that initially there was an idea that the water would all be at the same elevation as the finished floor of the Clark Center. There is a lot of grade change between the Manton building, where I think you are right now, Olivier, and the Clark Center. And so as landscape architects, we were like, well, we think it would be much more beneficial to all of us if we could gradually step this reflecting pool. And so over time, it went from being one pool to, I think, 2 pools to 4 pools. Then it went back to 3 pools. You can see also at one point we had a bridge going over it. And that sense of what should be hard, what should be soft, how much do you deflect in terms of form and geometry to the natural system, and how much do you keep to a grid? For those of you who maybe worked on an Ando project, there is a deep commitment to the grid as an organizing structure for a project. And so, as you can see in the final iteration, the upper reflecting pool is quite true to sort of gridded logic. And then there's a gradual sort of naturalization inside of organic forms, and I would say like a deference to the natural systems that we're meeting as you step down. This water feature, these pools, were a source of using up a lot of the dewatering that was a consequence of the architectural solution which kept this building to 1 story. One of the things that I think you really experience when you're there, but doesn't get talked about very much, is actually how much of the Clark Center is below ground and how much of the experience of the Clark is actually on structure and green roof. That consequence of sinking into the ground did produce a lot of dewatering that then turned into a reservoir for sort of creating the water that became these reflecting pools. And when we were thinking about that as a source that needed to be made sense of, it became clear that we could have a fully integrated system of how water operates, both from a site point of view, but also for plumbing fixtures and roof water capture. And then I think ultimately the success of the pools is not the engineering, right? It is the feeling that people have when they're sitting on these terraces. And the terraces are very popular, perhaps even as Olivia was suggesting, in the middle of the night. I don't really know. I've only been there at night a few times. But even, in this kind of haunting image where there aren't people, the sense of a kind of softness in this landscape is something that is very loved. Um, they are, water does this well, but there are lots of tricks of perspective and experience that happen. And I think there are moments where the pools really serve to unite the architecture. There are also moments where the architecture, the buildings all disappear, and you really just experience yourself in a landscape. And I think you feel this in this image. There are also, because of the sound of the water, there are ways in which the weirs, the stepping stones that take you across, function to create moments for performance, but also really intimate moments. And one of the things that I've grown to love over time is that when kids, particularly, but even grown-ups, are sitting on these stepping stones, because of the sound of the water and how immersive the experience is, people forget that other people are watching them. And so you have this sort of unfolding of very intimate, sweet moments in this space. There's also ways that the lawn that we built to bridge and make an accessible set of connections for everybody. It's lofted a little bit higher than the pools themselves. And so there are moments in the landscape where you can look across to Stonehill Meadow and the woods, and you hardly see the water feature. And so that effect, which sometimes happens with the parking and happens with the pools, was something that we were interested in. And I'll sort of pause, I think, for a moment to talk about how at the end of the project, which took many, many years and was interrupted by the recession in 2009, there was a question of what was the role of art in the larger landscape at the Clark. And when we had begun, there was a deep commitment and excitement about how architecture could really advance the fortunes of the region and the fortunes of the Clark, and a sense that the collection itself was really already so important that it didn't need to have an exterior or site component to it. And so repeatedly, there was a sense that we don't need to have outdoor sculpture, and that will not be a part of the future of the Clark. And then I think the cows are this like almost everyday part of the posture at the Clark. And there was this moment where suddenly there was a Thomas Schutte commission called the Crystal in 2015, right around the opening. And it was meant to be a temporary exhibition. It was incredibly exciting to site it. It was a way to draw people up the hill and into the meadows and have them explore the landscape more. And I think in a funny way, it's still there, right, Olivier? It's not been temporary at all, really. And it's become a very loved part of the Clark. And I think it has sort of, I'm very excited to have you talk, Olivier, a little bit more about the way that the sort of works of sculpture and the outdoors are functioning today. But I think this moment, and this is an early photograph of that, was exciting to us because it made us think that, sometimes the rules that you begin with for a project just change once the project is over. And I think the last slide that I'm going to speak to before hopefully Olivier says a little bit more about their current projects related to the site and sculptures is this image in full glory of the very end pool in the water feature. And it really features beautifully one of the trees that was in the medians in the parking lot when we started. And so this was the one tree that we saved from the parking lot when we started. And it is a kind of hero tree now at the Clark. But I just felt it was a nice way to end. But there were some very small things from the way the Clark worked when we began that I think are integrated and treasured more now than when we began. And so, Olivia, I don't know if there's anything more that you want to add about your current programs related to the site and landscape, but that would be great.
Well, thank you very much, Beka. I think that I do not have too much to add to that. There is one little thing, which is the Ineses were given by Frank and Catherine Martucci's. But when it comes to the art in the nature, we kept this idea that the Clark would not be and will not be a sculpture place. We will not put sculpture in the landscape on a permanent basis. However, in 2020, and we are doing that again, we have an exhibition program which is lasting usually 1 year. We commission art from artists with the idea that the art will not stay. They will be on display in site-specific. Usually it is 6 artists. We do 6 things that are in the landscape, in the wood, in the meadows. But after a year, we take everything out, and it's extremely successful. It was also extremely successful because the first happened completely by chance during COVID, and suddenly it was the only thing to look at around, and suddenly people flocked to see the exhibition because it was a safe place. Could you have a next slide? I think, Beka, there is a next slide.
I think we have a slide thanking everybody for paying attention to us.
Thank you.
And I think with that, we'd love to invite some questions and conversation.
Yes, just as a reminder, everybody on the webinar, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit questions. So we have a couple to start. Thank you so much for joining as well. So the first question we have is about material choice. And the question is about different facade materials. But maybe, Beka, if you can speak to maybe the borders between the buildings and the landscape and kind of the collaboration between you and Ando's team.
Absolutely. There's a huge amount of attention spent on the material selection. And one of the things, trying to think about how to say this. One of the questions was when you have a white marble building right next to you, and that marble is actually local to the bedrock in this area, what you do with that. And, Ando is famous for his concrete work, and there was a deep commitment to working with Ando concrete, but the need to bridge between the concrete and the other 2 buildings was something that we returned to again and again. And so for the Lunder Center, which is featured in this image, there was a very animated dialogue for many years between Michael Conforti and Ando and Yano-san, one of the sort of principal in charge of the project for Ando's team, about how to get Ando concrete to feel of the Berkshires. And Michael Conforti really challenged the Ando team to use board form. And so there's a lot of experimentation with Gensler and local contractors to arrive at a concrete that felt a little bit like wood with the board form and still like Ando concrete. And so that was the resolution for the Lunder Center. For the Clark Center, there was the decision to integrate the kind of pink or red stone from the Manton, from the TAC project, into the project in some very limited ways. And so that bridge of where there is some of the stone, and it came from Cold Spring quarries. Took an enormous amount of effort. But the Clark Center is basically a combination of under concrete, that granite material, and then local aggregates and stone.
Great. The next question we have is about the maintenance of the water reservoir system. So how much maintenance does it need? Are there issues that you guys have seen come up in terms of that?
That's a great question. And there are folks from the Clark team who could probably answer that more accurately than Olivier or me, but I can share some of the things that I know. And Olivier, if you want to add anything, please do. We did we did commissioning of the water feature and actually the landscape as well as the mechanical systems for the project, and that was kind of cutting edge back in 2014 and 2015 when we did it. And one of the reasons we wanted to commission the landscape and the water feature and sort of the reservoir was to make sure that it was working as well as possible, because the sort of integration and the scale of the commitment from the Clark was unusual to a water feature of this size. I would say too that like we used ozone treatment originally and sand filters to make sure that the water was safe, and if there ever was an event where it spilled into the wetland, there wouldn't be problems. The bottom is concrete and then it has loose stones on it. And so water quality has been, I would say, a challenge for the Clark. There was originally an idea that there would be skating on the pools, and so having water be able to stay in the pools all year round was part of the design. I think quickly with the curtain walls and other safety issues, there was a policy decision that the Clark made to not have skating there, which I think is wise. And they ended up electing to drain the pools from a maintenance point of view in the winters. And so it's now a sort of stone garden. I think having a feature like that requires a lot of attention and ongoing maintenance. And we did try very hard to make it maintainable, but Olivier, I feel like it is something that you have to focus on a little bit every year, perhaps more than you would like to. And I'd love to hear any additional comments.
So it is manageable, but it's true that there is the main issue for us is the algae on the pebbles. Because in fact, after 1 or 2 years, and we did nothing for at least 6 years almost. I mean, and the last 5 and the fifth and 6th years, we really realized that we needed to act, and we had a quite radical solution. We when the water was emptied at the beginning of the winter, we created a sort of machine to clean the pebbles, which was a radical solution, but very efficient. We are still working on with this machine now almost every 2 or 3 years. We try to not do that so often, also because it has a cost. And but things are working better also because we added more. We added some water streams that are in fact avoiding algae to develop if the water is too much static. But it's not a big deal. No, it's fine. No, it's a big deal, but it's not unsurmountable. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just share that, like, because we sat through or whatever we participated in millions of meetings about this. There was a deep challenge because everything had to meet the highest environmental standards, and so the normal way you would handle something like that is like with a treatment like bleach or something that would achieve your water quality aims, but maybe has some pollutants that just didn't work in this community or for this client. And at the same time, another way that you could solve it is by not having void spaces for living algae to gather in, but that also felt too urban. And so having the loose river stones was really critical to the experience. And there is a maintenance cost to that, sort of the naturalism. At the same time, there's frogs and birds. There's more habitat than there would be, if they'd taken more conventional routes.
Well, it also sounds like there's like two experiences where there's the pools and then the drain pools, and that's kind of interesting as well. Our next question is about lessons learned in regards to the turf overflow parking areas. I do want to comment, Beka, I loved your phrase of fingers of parking. I thought that was super interesting. And I think that's something, parking in general is something that is so important about the access and the experience of folks when you first arrive at any place, but especially a museum. So if you want to talk about that, that'd be great.
Sure, and I think Olivier, you could talk about it too. I think when I, made the decision, or whatever, if it's really a decision, when I became a landscape architect, I did not think I was signing up to design parking. It was not like one of the dreams that I had identified for myself. As it turns out, management of how we all work with our vehicles and the horizontal surface of the landscape is a huge part of being a landscape architect. And so working beautifully with our attachment and reliance on cars has become a huge part of my life. And certainly from an accessibility point of view, it's really, really important to have easy, beautiful relationship between those. That said, we didn't save it because it was so scary. Actually, maybe it's somewhere in our archive, but the drawing after our first conversation with the fire chief about where he wanted asphalt around these buildings, it was a literal ring. Like I forget what the radius was. Let's just
Like a
say
full
like
coverage.
150 feet, perfect, offset from the facades of all three buildings. And he's the greatest fire chief. So, we're super attached to him and have had a great working relationship after all these years. But like, there's these meetings that you have when you're doing design where you just think, I know it's never, like, this is doomed. And so we did all this research about, and Tanglewood has, which is not so far from the Clark, has parked people on their lawn for a long time. And we're like, look, there is no reason that once a year the fire might happen here or needs to be tested, and the times where there are peak parking demands, that we need to surround these buildings with asphalt for either parking or for life safety. And so we did a lot of research and we had a lot of meetings, and we worked really closely, both from a parking point of view and a life safety point of view, with the fire chief and the other folks who care about how everyone gets in and out. I think the last thing I would say about this is it is some distance that you have to move to get into the Clark. And I think that decision to work with Ando's long wall and to kind of really let people out into the landscape and then have them come inside, like that's a challenging experience from an accessibility point of view. And I don't know, Olivier, how you feel about it. I think it does put landscape first, and that experience that Olivier said of, like, you come through the doors of the Clark, and then because of the glass vestibule, many people just walk immediately outside onto the terraces. They don't go into the galleries as their first thing. So that sort of gift of the landscape and the like, that you hear, like, you still hear it every time if you hang out in that vestibule. That is a consequence of walking that longer walk along that wall and being in the landscape. But Olivia, I'd be super interested in your thoughts about that.
Well, I have probably a slightly different point of view as a European about the strong need of a parking close to the building. I'm probably I'm less inclined to think it is important, but I think the reality is it is extremely important to our public. it's true also that this sort of the experience you just described to go through next to this long wall and then entering the place. I just want to add some figures. In fact, now almost a third of our public is not coming to visit the Clark itself. They go around. They come, but to see the collection and to see the exhibition. But it's true that there is a sort of recurring recurring sort of visitors that are coming to see the landscape or to enjoy the landscape or to enjoy the architecture. The other thing is as Beka described, the fact that we do not have so many parking lots. We have also parking on the other side of the building, but during the summer it's not enough. And Beka, you are aware of that. We created a parking which is in another part of the town, and we are using this parking during the summer now to ask the staff to park there, and then we shuttle or they walk to the Clark. But there is a sort of seasonality of the parking which is not used the same way during the year and during the summer.
The last question I have is for you, Olivier, if you can talk a little bit about the indoor and outdoor programming that you guys are doing. This question is specifically about musical performances, if you can talk to that.
Yeah, I think it is now a very important part of the Clark programs. It is something that during the last years we really insisted on. Also because or thanks to the architecture, the people want to enjoy the place in a different way. There is an amazing auditorium which was built in the building in 1973 at the highest level of acoustic. The chair of the board of the Clark was one of the board members of Tanglewood, and he wanted to have a chamber music place not so far. But now I think I don't remember, but the numbers of program we do outdoor, we just had this incredibly successful concert this weekend by this ensemble called the Knights, who performed also at Tanglewood this summer. And it's really part of now the experience of the Clark for the people who come during the season, during the high season, which is the summer. It's really now something that you cannot disconnect from the Clark experience in general. I mean, the musical, and it all sorts of music. It's not only classical music. It could be very, very. We had an amazing Caribbean music program this summer linked to the exhibition. That there is a lot of things that are happening now outside, and it is something that was almost not existing before the extension. And before this link with the landscape, with the hill, and also with the reflecting pool, the existence of the reflecting pool, it's a sort of perfect stage for many things. We worked also with the Williamstown Theatre Festival some years ago to have plays on the reflecting pool. I mean, not next to the reflecting, on the reflecting pool. And that was something which was also inducing a different attitude about the mix of nature and buildings and art on top of that.
Great. Well, I think that's an excellent place to stop. And just want to say thank you so much to Beka and Olivier today. And thank you to all of you who have joined the program this afternoon. We will be recording this and releasing it out in a couple of weeks. And be sure to go to the October website, newly launched today, to check out all the upcoming events in September and then, of course, in October itself. And hope everybody has a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.